first administrator at the CIA. Charming, avuncular, kind of senior scientists of the Mengele School of Science.
In the 1970s, the intelligence services realized that they didn't need to infiltrate seances because they had a great psychic in their midst, this man.
The people who are acknowledged to be great, of course, are Joe McMoneagle. His name is always mentioned when it comes to remote viewing successes.
What does the trigger mechanism on the Chinese nuclear weapon look like? Well, if you know where a Chinese nuclear weapon's sitting, then you can go out of body to that specific location and walk across the lab and look at the weapon sitting on the lab table and press your face down through the weapon casing and look at the weapon trigger mechanism, size it up, then come back, sit at a desk and draw it to scale.
And that is something specifically that
That's something specifically that's
that
done.
you did?
Yeah.
And did they act on it?
Oh yeah. It's easily done.
And did it prove to be correct?
I can't confirm or deny that.
It had been a year since something frightening had made Prudence close down her business, and she still hadn't been in touch. The link between the psychics and the darker mind control programs made me think that maybe Prudence had got herself mixed up in a world where she was out of her depth. I looked back at the year-old tapes of the Psychic Spying Reunion Convention. For some strange reason, the organisers had banned the delegates from actually doing any psychic spying. Prudence had sensed that I wasn't entirely convinced that psychics fighting the war on terror was a good idea, and she wanted to prove that it was. So we crept away to a hotel room so I could test her psychic skills.
So I'm going to write something down and keep it secret from you.
But you need to do it now.
Okay, I'm going to do it now.
Do it now.
So I'm going to go to that table over there and do it.
Yeah. Just, don't show me what you're going to write down.
I thought it might be an interesting opportunity to get one crazy branch of Alan Dulles' CIA to spy on another crazy branch of Alan Dulles' CIA. So I wrote, what happened to Frank Olson when they spiked his drink with LSD in 1953? I put the piece of paper in my pocket and nobody saw what I had written.
Okay, I focused on one of the people. He has a headache or something, a lot of head pain. It doesn't stop hurting, something feels swollen to him, his head feels like it will explode. He's really uncomfortable, but he keeps walking like a zombie or something. Anyway, just feels really weird, zombie-like, his head just hurts. Someone stuck something in his head. Doesn't make any sense.
Someone stuck something in his head?
Yeah, but I know it doesn't make sense, but that's what it is. Someone stuck something in his head. It is very, dream-like.
Like a zombie?
He couldn't think. He was just had one
Tripping.
thing on his mind.
Oh.
It's like a buzzy electric, Like buzzy electric. Buzzy electric. It's it's buzzy. It's buzzy. And it makes his head feel just huge. It's buzzy.
Can you draw
It feels dreamy and spacey too, doesn't it?
Totally dreamy and spacey, like a zombie.
Yeah.
Totally like a zombie. Only has bits and pieces of memory of this, getting in his head. Why'd they put something in his head? And there's something really brown about him.
I was extremely impressed. I hadn't mentioned his name. I hadn't mentioned LSD. I'd said nothing.
Is it time for me to tell you?
Yeah.
Olson.
Olson?
Great.
He's the guy who jumped out the window. Is that in the American history that occurred?
This was a CIA thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
CIA
really?
thing.
I never heard of
American
this.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's when the CIA was like,
No
"See what happens to
wonder
this
he was
person
like a
when we do that."
zombie and totally tripping out.
totally
And he was
tripping out.
like,
Because he didn't
Yeah.
know.
Confused.
and everything, every time I looked through his eyes, everything was brown to me. It was like really freaky.
It's
We
that
didn't
big,
get a
right?
submarine underwater.
And by the
Didn't
time
get
it
a
was
plate
in
of
his head,
fresh
it was just
clean
chemical.
dried tomatoes or anything like
That's
that.
right. You
Those
got
are
a dead
pretty
guy and
standard.
something that stuck in his head and made him a zombie.
But I'm glad it
Yeah.
worked.
I thought your possessions
It always
were
works.
I thought possessions were fabulous.
It was an extremely impressive psychic vision of a bad LSD trip, but there was just one thing. The man who lives in this house was Frank Olson's closest friend from the CIA days.
Did you see him after he'd been given the LSD?
Yes, we joked about it to some extent.
What did he say?
Well, he just said, they're trying to find out what kind of a guy I am and whether or not I'm giving secrets away.
So you were joking about it. Did he say...
He joked about it because he didn't react to LSD.
What, he didn't... He wasn't tripping at all?
So who was right? Should we believe Prudence's psychic vision, in which Frank did seem to be having a bad trip? Or should we believe Norman's story, in which he didn't? Had Prudence somehow, weirdly, been remote viewing the myth of Frank Olson and not the reality?
So did he say, you'll never guess what they did? They put LSD in my drink.
Yes, he told me.
How did he say it? Was he laughing about it?
Yeah,
Like the
Yeah.
crazy things these people are doing?
I think it was more than that. He really thought that they were picking on him now because they thought he was the man who might give away the secrets.
But there was a particular thing that they were worried that he'd
Oh, yeah.
talk about.
No question about it.
Do you think I know what that particular specific thing was?
Boy, you are an artist. That's a beautiful way of trying to get something from me that I don't want to talk about. The answer is I don't want to say anything.
If Norman was right and Frank didn't have a bad trip, then why did he jump out of a window a week later? What was the secret that Norman wouldn't tell me?
Any second thoughts this morning? No. No? I keep waiting for you to change your mind.
These are the questions that have been haunting Frank's son, Eric, for the past 50 years. A few years ago, Eric had his father's body exhumed.
The amazing part of this, I gotta tell you, I saw Daddy, I saw him. He was very well preserved in the sense that the body seemed really intact, first of all. You could see that the legs had been broken. And the color of everything was a kind of brownish, kind of leathery color.
The autopsy revealed that Frank Olson had been hit on the head with something like the butt of a gun before he went out of the window.
He certainly did not jump out the window, and God knows he didn't fall out.
So what do you think did happen in that room?
I think it's quite clear that he was thrown out the window.
One day, Eric was looking at old home movies of his father. He found another reel that he hadn't seen before, that his father had shot in the summer before his death. Eric never knew why his father had gone to Europe with some fellow CIA men, but now he does know.
Didn't he come back from Europe looking very upset?
Yeah, we talked about a week, 10 days after he came back. And I asked him, I said, what happened to you, Frank? You seem awfully upset. And he said, I don't want to go on further than that because it devolves certain things which I don't think I'd like to talk about.
But Eric has had more luck with his father's old friend. Norman told Eric everything.
That's my father right there. That was him. Yeah, that's him. In comparison with these other guys from the CIA, he just has an open face. I mean, basically, this is a story about a guy who was pretty, had a kind of simple moral code, a kind of naive view of the world. Just got way beyond his. I mean, he wasn't fundamentally a military guy, and he certainly wasn't somebody who could be involved in terminal interrogations. And I think he went through a, basically a moral crisis. But he was in too deep and they couldn't let him out. My father's colleague recently told me that this was what my father had gotten involved with in many trips to Germany, these interrogations in which people died. They were put, as my father's colleague put it, they didn't care whether people came out of this or not. So they might survive, they might not, or they might be put to death, at the end.
How were people dying when being interrogated?
Well, because the methods were so extreme.
According to Norman Canoyer, Sidney Gottlieb and Alan Dulles were not just recruiting psychics and spiking people's drinks with LSD. There was a third exotic mind warfare endeavour, inventing new ways to torture Cold War detainees. If what I've been told is true, this is what Frank was involved in, but he had a crisis of conscience and was going to tell the press, so they pushed him out of the window.
Now it's not a family story anymore. It's not about, what happened to Eric's father. It's about what does this story about Eric's father show us about, what was going on in the 50s and how that informs what's going on today. Think of how much could have been different if he was alive to tell any of this. The whole history of a lot of things would be different. And you can see a lot of that just in his face, actually. It's fascinating. Because most of these others have very tight, closed faces. And he doesn't.
I wondered, had Prudence gone to ground for similar reasons? Was she, like Frank Olson, a naive foot soldier talking to the press, getting out of her depth?
This is our record-breaking diesel concept car. Record-breaking, just not that practical. Which is why at Vauxhall, we took the same technology and put it into our other diesels. The new performance diesels from Vauxhall.
I don't get it.
Why is it easier to take pictures than it is to print them?
Or scan them.
Or transfer them.
Or even just find them.
Now there's a way to uncomplicate. Lexmark, our new photo all-in-one printer, makes it easier than ever. See, enhance and print your photos. See how at your nearest store or lexmark.co.uk.
Gentlemen, this is perfection. Now we need a plan.
Guess what? Guess who? Somebody stole my thunder, and now somebody's gonna pay. I'll soon be freaking out from under, and love to live another day.
All right, lads. What kept you? Perfect Cream, now also available at home.
Why do they call this a Glen of Tranquility?
Hard to say, really.
Glenmorangie, will you join us in the Glen of Tranquility?
How does he sleep at night? Horlicks could help anyone get a restful night's sleep.
You're IT guys, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you gotta help me. My computer has a virus. I've gotta email a presentation or I'm dead. It's for a board meeting. Maybe you could just rip out the hard drive.
No. Just press the blue button and follow along.
That's it?
That's it.
That's it?
That's it. That easy.
That's it.
You ever tried decaf?
Stress-free wireless, only on a ThinkPad with Intel Centrino mobile technology.
You can enjoy a creamy pint of Boddingtons whenever you like with a new draft barrel. Stays fresh for up to 28 days once opened.
Pourquoi on l'appelle la vallée de la tranquillité?
Glenmorangie wood finishes, extra aged in different casks.
Difficile à dire.
Tranquility, with a hint of Portugal, Spain, or France.
The past 50 years have given British cinema goers an abundance of great films. Now, for the very first time, we unveil the 100 most successful films shown in UK cinemas. What would be your ultimate film? Start Saturday at 9 on 4.
A year after Prudence closed down her business, she called. She said she was ready to tell me what had happened. She said there was a terrible story from her past that would explain everything. She said the story begins in 1995, before the world knew that the military psychic spies even existed. Prudence was living in Atlanta then, designing websites. She turned on the TV one night, and this was how it all began. A military man was on the screen.
And did he say he was like a real-life Obi-Wan Kenobi?
That's exactly the words he used. He said that he was a real-life Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Working for the US military.
Working for the US military.
And until that moment, nobody knew that these people even existed.
Yeah, before this time, it had been completely kept secret.
The military man on TV revealed for the first time that the army had psychic spies and that they could shoot anywhere in space and time. He said they knew where terrorists were hiding, and they knew that the Loch Ness Monster was actually a dinosaur's ghost.
He was one of the leaders of the unit, according to his story, and he just didn't look like what you would expect. He looked like a normal person. He didn't look like he had super secret powers. So
What did he look like?
He was short and scrawny, and he had this kind of crazy hairdo from the 70s and this mustache.
And what was his name?
His name was Ed Dames. I remembered why I was so excited about science fiction and thought, if I could learn how to do this just like he learned how in the military, then I could figure out all the things I need to know.
Were people cross with you?
Were people what?
Cross.
Did you say cross?
Yeah.
Irate? Angry? Oh, you bet. You bet. The Defense Intelligence Agency mounted an investigation.
Ed Dames. You know, if anybody should have put a gag in his mouth, that should have been the first one, because he clearly was out talking when he should have been listening. Very upsetting, incidentally.
Why?
Well, he had taken the same oath I took. Puffed his chest up and said, I was one of them. He wanted to be king. There's no doubt about it. You know? Yap, 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 yap.
What was your motive for doing it?
No, actually, I didn't have any motive. I didn't have any motive at all.
Ed's rise to national celebrity was helped by the fact that interviewers sounded so beguiled by his military credentials and startled by his psychic predictions.
Edward A. Dames, Major U.S. Army, retired now, is a decorated military intelligence officer, an original member of the U.S. Army prototype remote viewing training program, served as the Training and Operations Officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency's Psychic Intelligence, or PSIINT, Collection Unit.
Military acronyms sound truly mesmerizing.
Now, here's what, this is important, and before everybody goes to bed, listen to this. When you see a space shuttle, one of our space shuttles, being forced to come down and land because of a meteor shower, that is the beginning of the end. That's the harbinger. Immediately after that will begin some drastic geophysical changes in the Earth, eventually resulting in a wobble and possibly an entire pole shift.
Oh. There will be some who will live through this, Ed, or will no one live through it?
No, we're looking at a couple of billion people. They're going to get crisped.
Oh, the Art Bell Show. Coast to Coast Radio is the name of the show, and Art Bell had the biggest paranormal news radio show in the whole country, probably the world. They talk about Bigfoot sightings.
And in the middle of this, there was suddenly a major from the U.S. Army with top-level clearance.
Yeah, Ed Dames immediately became one of Art Bell's very favorite interviewees of all time.
I liked him the first time I did the show, and he helped me business-wise to sell my products on his show. So I'm very grateful for him for that, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
It must have sounded to some listeners as if they were almost eavesdropping on a top-level meeting inside the Pentagon, listening to Ed Dames and Art Bell.
Yeah, it sounded real, and he would back it all up with everything that had been done in the military, so it made sense.
I can't help thinking that if one of Ed's less colourful former military psychic colleagues had decided to spill the beans instead, all the terrible things that happened next might have been averted. Ed retired from the army and set up a psychic spying school for civilians. Until then, the psychic craziness had remained covert and controlled, a military secret that never left army bases. Now it was out in the private sector, and it was